All right. Good evening, and I hopefully will have enough sun to finish it. And so if you guys haven't figured out yet, we are camping. And so I'm going to try and do this, get through John 10 tonight, hopefully with minimized distractions. I've already had it was my phone went off and it was a bit of a distractor. And so I only got neighbors here and such. But anyways, so we're going to continue on in John 10 tonight. And I hope that you guys are having a good summer so far, that this whole COVID thing isn't rocking your world too much, and that you've got some time to actually sit down and open up the Word and enjoy the Word. And so I'm enjoying the Word. I'm enjoying this study. And so we're gonna pick up with John 10. And if you remember right, John 9 was when the blind man was healed, and the conclusion of John 9 was that they kicked him out of the synagogue, cast him out. And who was there? Jesus was there. So Jesus is, I was kind of toying with titles for chapter 10. One of the ones was Jesus Brings the Heat, and I'll explain that later. But I ended up titling this one, Relationship with My Shepherd, My Lord. And you'll see why that makes sense. And when you look at John 10, you'll notice there's kind of 4 tracks kind of laid out. It has to do with shepherding and sheep. And so there's sheep outside of God's fold, and a fold is where you keep your sheep. And so it'll make sense here in a second. It's a lot of sheep lingo here. So there's all of us humans are sheep. And so some of us are in God's fold and some of us are not. So that's flavor 1 and 2, a sheep in God's fold, a sheep out of God's fold. Okay. The other 2 flavors that you can take this chapter with is as a shepherd. Are you a bad? And once again, God calls people to shepherd His flocks, and He calls a lot. And sometimes He gets some bad ones, and sometimes He gets some good ones. And so, if God has called you to shepherd others, are you a bad shepherd or a good shepherd? And so, this chapter, depending on which you fall in, whether you're God's fold or not in God's fold, or as a good shepherd or not a good shepherd, or maybe you were, as a sheep, you were shepherded by a bad shepherd. So then some of this will make sense. And so there are people that God has called to shepherd a sheep. In the Old Testament, those would be your elders, your priests, your prophets, your Pharisees. Okay, those would be your general flavors for those. And then in New Testament, we have shepherds is another word for elders, which is another word for pastors, okay, and deacons to some degree, shepherd sheep as well. So those are Old Testament and New Testament shepherds. And so I have to give you some context. There's a couple chapters, and I'm encouraging, and once again, as always, I put anything that I reference, I put down in the comments. And I just realized I didn't shave today. Sorry about that, guys. I'm on vacation. Anyways, there's 2. We're actually going to. There's 3 main references that Jesus is kind of alluding to, and so you have to kind of go read those before you read chapter 10. I'll give you the gist of them. I'll give you the cliff notes, so to speak. First one's the 23rd Psalm. We're actually going to I'll read this one to you because it's only like 6 verses long. And it's interesting too. The 23rd Psalm is often cited at funerals when really it's a psalm about living. And so I'm going to go through that. I'm also going to go through Ezekiel 34, and then I'll go through another psalm. I think it's Psalm 82 later on. But there's 3 contextual references that you got to get before you jump into John 10. And so 23rd Psalm, you have to understand, is a psalm from a sheep's perspective. We're talking about the good shepherd. Okay, so I'll read that to you. 23rd Psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. And that's the first part you get a key on. The Lord is my shepherd. So that means you are, remember I told you there's 2 types of sheep. You're either in God's fold or you're not. Okay, so this one is to those that are in God's fold. And so the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So here's I kind of just summarized some attributes of the Lord as my shepherd. And I have to apologize too. There's mosquitoes flying around here. You probably can't see them. I don't see if you see them. Every once in a while you see me doing this, I'm doing this because there's mosquitoes out here. Anyways, this is real life, Hashtag the struggle is real. Anyways, attributes of the Lord is as my good shepherd. It's kind of interesting. He meets all of my needs, and he makes me lay down in provision. That's kind of an interesting thing. He leads me to calm, and he restores my soul. He removes my fear, and he comforts me. These are all things that the good shepherd will do. This is all the things that when the Lord is your shepherd, these are all things he do. He feeds me. I like this too. He anoints me with his spirit and provides a permanent dwelling. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so that I looked it up, and that was right around 1000 BC. Okay, and the reason why I'm going to use that date is because God, 1000 BC says, okay, guys, for all you shepherds, because we're going to get into Ezekiel 34 here, sorry. All you shepherds, here is the model. And as a teacher, I found that, that when I'm teaching my students, I'm a high school teacher, if you guys haven't figured that out yet. You model something first, and then you let them go and give it a try. And so I think in Psalm 23, God is giving a pretty good model of what it means to be a good shepherd. So in 23rd Psalm, so that's 1000 BC. Well, 571 BC. So what is that? I hate doing math in public. I should have done that earlier. So let's just say 400 years later, 400 and some change, if I did my math right. Ezekiel 34 comes out, and this is God condemning Israel's shepherds for doing a lousy job. And so I'm not going to read that to you. I'm just going to give you the cliff notes on it. So I want you to go look that up. But you have to keep in mind the Pharisees. Well, I'm eventually going to get into John 10. The Pharisees knew Ezekiel 34. Okay, so they knew that God was not happy with his shepherds. Okay, I apologize. We're camping, and there's a road over there. See if you hear that too. Okay, so the Pharisees would have known this chapter. So when he's referencing this stuff, they would have known that. And so it's basically Ezekiel 34 condemns bad shepherds because he judges them because they fed off of God's sheep. They weren't shepherding at all. And the end result is the flock was weak and scattered and hungry. And so, and then interestingly enough, he goes in and he says, because of their failure, he's going to take over and he's going to become the shepherd for Israel. And there's 16 I will promise. I will do this. I will do this. I will do this. There's 16 of them in Ezekiel 34 when he says he will take over and be a good shepherd to Israel. All right. And here's the six. I kind of summarized the 16 promises. He's going to search. He's going to bring. He's going to feed. He's going to save. Okay. So there's basically round them up, bring them to somewhere where they can feed, and he's going to get them saved. However, he also is going to establish a judge and judge them. So that's where it comes to. Remember I told you in the beginning, we're all sheep, but you're either in God's fold or you're not. And so judgment will come. If you're in God's fold, don't worry about it. He's a good shepherd. So anyways, that's Ezekiel 34. I would go read both these and, spend some time, 23rd Psalm, Ezekiel 34. Spend some time in those and get the gist of it. God's really angry in Ezekiel 34. Okay, so keep in mind, so Ezekiel 34 says, I will come and become a shepherd. And remember the 16 I wills? Okay, so that you understand that context coming into John 10. Okay, so John 10, and keep in, once again, to get back up to and just review that, the fact that these guys had just kicked out the blind man who was healed. They kicked him out of the synagogue. Okay, and so they were not shepherding this guy, and they're not. Anyways, he's speaking to them in this chapter. I honestly think that He's speaking to us. There's good stuff in here too. That's the thing too. You come out of this chapter. If you're a bad shepherd and you read this chapter, you're like, I'm not headed down a good road. I need to change my shepherding, habits. And if you're not a sheep in God's fold, that's another thing. You're reading through this chapter, you go, I need to get into God's fold. But if you're in God's fold and He is your shepherd, then you're in great shape. I need to get started here because I spent a long time in contextualization here. Anyways, okay, so I'm in chapter 10, John 10, verse 1. Most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold, remember I talked about that, by the door, but climbs up by some other way, the same as a thief and a robber. But he who enters the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this illustration. I always love this too. His disciples, they always need to kind of like simplify it for him. So that's what he does here. Jesus used this illustration, but they did not understand the things which he spoke to them. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. And I'm going to talk about that later. He's got a whole bunch of I ams through John. I want to say there's 7 of them. And later on, when we get to the 7th I am, I'll go back and review them. He says, I am the door. All who came, if anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life and that they may have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. I think that right there. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep, but a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he's a hireling and does not care about the sheep. Okay? And so there's a whole bunch of shepherding things going on here, sheep facts here. And so the first thing that's kind of interesting too is that this is one thing you can find out is, okay, am I in God's fold or not? If you're in God's fold, you have voice recognition software installed in your heart. And so that's his spirit in us. And Ezekiel 36:27 says that I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you'll keep my judgments and do them. So that's the first thing you know. If you're in his fold, you have the voice recognition software installed. And so he says, I am the door. Jesus is the door. Okay, so he's the official entrance in for the sheep, into the sheepfold. And it's interesting too, because it's very specific and very small. Jesus, I mean, you think about it, you think about all the different possibilities today, with Buddha and Hinduism and Islam and Mormonism. You figure out there's a whole bunch of possibilities, but there's only one door. Matthew 7:13 and 14 kind of emphasize that enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life. And there are few who find it. I would encourage you to find it. And that's the thing too, is there are other shepherds, whether they're pastors or what have you in today's age. They will come in Jesus' name. They will come via Jesus into the sheep's fold. One thing he says there too, I am the good shepherd. And I think I alluded to that as I was reading it. I think he's there declaring Ezekiel. Remember I told you in Ezekiel 34 where it says he says he's going to come because these shepherds did such a lousy job. I will come and shepherd. Let's say Ezekiel, that particular verse in Ezekiel 34 is Ezekiel 34:11, where he says, I myself will search for my sheep. And I think that's what he's saying right there in the chapter there. He is saying, hey guys, this is me. I'm executing Ezekiel 34. And it was interesting too. This kind of okay. And in full disclosure here, I'm a shepherd at our church. I'm one of the elders, and his he is the good shepherd, and he defines that as sacrificial, laying down his life. And I tell you, I had to do some soul searching when I was reading that. I was going, a good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Would I lay down my life for my sheep? I mean, I serve my sheep, and it's caused me to really, and I don't have an answer for it yet. Would I lay down my life for a sheep? It's for the sheep that the Lord has appointed me over. I don't know. That's a toughie. I'm gonna talk to my fellow shepherds and my pastor when I get home about that one. About, hey, would you lay down your life for your sheep? Jesus would. I'm glad, because we're anyways. I don't want to make myself look too bad. But he does. Speaking of looking bad, there are some bad guys to watch out for. So you got your thief and the robber. They're in there. One sneaky, one bold, and there's verses that talk about these guys throughout the New Testament. Romans 16:17 talks about this. How about these guys, these thief and these robbers? They cause divisions and they create obstacles because they're seeking to fulfill their own appetites. There's the stranger too, which is false teachers. And interestingly enough, for false teachers, 2 Timothy 4:3 talks about it in the sense that the sheep desire, they go and seek out these false teachers because they want to tickle itching ears. They want to hear things a certain way. I think that is even more impactful in today's culture, is that people want the word to line up with their culture, so they will go seek out false teachers or strangers. Here is what it's referred to. Wolves are false prophets, and interestingly enough, too, it's the false prophets that kind of reveal who the hirelings are, and so and your hirelings are people who it says here they don't own the sheep. They're doing it as a job and not as a calling. But I thought that was kind of interesting. It's the wolf coming that reveals the hireling. Let's get back into John here. Verse 14. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and am known by my own. Hey, beautiful. Could you turn this light on up here? Thanks. It's getting dark. And I'm known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And the other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. And so what he's talking about here, other sheep, and you got to keep in mind, once again, his audience is a Jewish audience. He's starting to talk about us, the Gentiles. The church that's coming. There's multiple folds, two folds, Israel and the Gentiles, the church, one flock. And interestingly enough, too, you have to keep in mind, if you go read Romans 11, you'll find out that it's not replacement theology. It's an age. It's the church age. And so go read Romans 11, and I'll help straighten that out for you. Verse 17. Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life, and that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. And so this one here, I think, was kind of an interesting one for me too, because Jesus is declaring that he's going to die. He's going to lay down his life as the good shepherd. He's going to sacrifice himself, but he has the power to take it back up. And so there was part of me that said, well, okay, if he has the power to set it down, it's kind of like a known commodity. You know the end story, so you go ahead and walk out the story because you know the story. The thing that negates is the whole crucifixion and the whole the whole mess that had to be endured. And so here is God knowing from the beginning what was going to happen and still walking that out. Go read Isaiah 53, verses 3 through 5. Go take a look at that. It talks about how Jesus was stricken for us. He was basically abused and all these things. God prophesied this through Isaiah, knowing it was going to happen, and then walked it out as Jesus. And so here he's saying that, hey guys, I do this of my own accord, my own free will. I'm laying my life down, but I know I can pick it up as well. And so no, having said that, verse 19, therefore there was a division again, go figure, among the Jews because of these sayings. And many of them said, he has a demon and is mad. Why do you listen to him? Others said, these are not words of one who has a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of a blind? And so right there, Jesus is always going to bring us to that ultimate decision. Is he Lord or not? Is he your Lord or not? And so that's a decision you have to make for yourself. I have a verse in here. It says, you basically can, if you go look it up, Matthew, I'll read it to you. I'll tell you what, Matthew 7, 16 through 18. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good fruit bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. And so there's kind of an understanding there that Israel was not ready to face up. They weren't ready to take a look at the tree and look at the fruit on the tree and then say what kind of what fruit it is. And Jesus was definitely not best. Anyways, verse 22. And this is just kind of, I think, just kind of a setup here. Now it was the Feast of Dedication in Jerusalem, and it was winter. And Jesus walked into the temple, into Solomon's porch. Then the Jews surrounded him and said to him, how long do you keep us in doubt? If you're the Christ, tell us plainly. Like he hasn't told them plainly already. But here's, I think, the reason why this is included in here. Solomon's porch is the eastern part of the temple complex, and it's where the king went to make judgments. Okay, so the king goes to this location to make judgments. And the Feast of Dedication, I don't know if that's why that's in there, but I know that was when the temple had been taken over by a bad guy, and he desecrated the temple, and it was rededicated. It was cleansed and rededicated. So here is Jesus standing in a spot where kings make judgment, and talking about in a celebration of cleansing and rededication. And so I think that's appropriate setup for what Jesus is about to tell them, because he's about to judge them. Anyways. Jesus answered them, this is verse 25. I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me, but you do not believe because you are not my sheep. As I said to you, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, and I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my hand. Out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. So here he is, he's judging them because they don't believe God's word or his works. And that you probably, if you've known me for any amount of time, this is kind of one of those things where you don't want to come to the end of your life and hear these 4 words, I never knew you. If you go read Matthew 7, 21 through 23, it talks about people when they come to the end of the rope and they say, Lord, Lord, I did all these great things in your name, and Lord, Lord, and he turns around and says, I never knew you. And that's kind of a bad ending. This ending you should never have. If you get yourself into Jesus' fold, you don't have to worry about that ending. And here's once again, if you are in the fold, a couple promises is you'll hear God's voice. And you're secure in God's hand. I was talking to somebody about that the other day about, concerned about whether he's saved or not, or, he's too far gone. And I said, can you still hear God's voice? Do you still have that voice recognition software? Yes. Then guess what? Satan can't snatch you out of God's hand. So there's a kind of there's security. You're in safe hands. That's where maybe we're all Allstate got their logo from. Anyways, verse 31. Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, "Many good works I have shown you from my Father. For which of these works do you stone me?" The Jews answered him, saying, "For a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you, being a man, make yourself God." Okay, and so it wasn't his works that they wanted to stone him; it was his words. Okay, works require nothing of us, but words require us to decide who are we going to serve. Are we going to serve religion, or are we going to serve God? And I have Sandra and I have this little plaque. It's Joshua 24:15. It's on. It used to be on our front door. Now it's on our door coming in from our garage. So if you're over my house and you come in through the garage, you'll see it. But as for me and my house, we will serve this. We will serve the Lord. And so that's God's words require that you do that. You figure out who you're going to serve, and that's what they were going to stone him for. And I looked up blasphemy. The thing that they're talking about, it's out of Leviticus 24:16, and it does declare as a death penalty for blaspheming the Lord, but it's insulting or lack of reverence towards God is what the blasphemy. And I don't think Jesus was being irreverent towards God, but they assumed by him saying that he was the Son of God, that was irreverent and of blasphemy. Anyways, once again, go back to the fruit. Remember, we talked about the fruit. Was his fruit worthy of blasphemy? He does these things. Wait till we get next chapter's Lazarus resurrection, John 10, and he says, to the crowd, it says, "For these people, Father, let them know that I am your son." And, Lazarus, come forth. So you'll hear that next chapter. So his fruit is right along there with the Father. He's not blaspheming Father. He's glorifying the Father. Anyways, so on to verse 34. Jesus answered, is it not written that... Okay, and this is, remember I talked about this earlier. I got to pause here for a second. I said there's another verse, another chapter you should go read. This is it here, Psalm 82, because he's going to reference some things here, and I'll give you the cliff notes on Psalm 82. But go back and check that yourself here. But anyways, let me read it, and then I'm going to reference Psalm 82. Jesus answered them, "Is it not written in your law? I said," I think it's funny. He says, "I said, you are gods." If he called them gods to whom the word of God came, and the scripture cannot be broken, do you say of him whom the Father sanctified and sent in the world, you are blaspheming because I said, I am the Son of God? If I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. I like this. This is exactly what I was talking about, the fruits we're talking about. But if I do, though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and believe that the Father is in me and I am in him. That's a solid stuff there. I love that, because it's fruits. Look at my fruits. Test me. Test my fruits is what Jesus is saying. Therefore they sought again to seize him, but he escaped out of their hand. Okay, so what he's referring to there is you are gods. In Psalm 82, it was referring once again to Israel's leadership, the Sanhedrin, the elders, and God calls them gods because the word of God came to them, okay, and they had the power over others as a god. They had the power to affect other people's lives, and the word came to them, so they were as gods in the power that they had. Yet, and this is where, if you go read Psalm 82, he's mad. God's mad at them because they don't judge justly and they don't deliver and defend the poor. And so they're doing a lousy job. And so he's referencing, okay, you're getting all bent around the axle about me using the title Son of God when you are referenced as gods in Psalm 82. So you are referenced as God's, and I say I'm the Son of God. What's the big deal here? And so this is where I told you I was thinking about changing the title to Jesus Bringing the Heat, because between Ezekiel 34 and Psalm 82, both of these are aimed right at the Pharisees. I mean, right at the Pharisees. Well, not so much the Pharisees, at bad shepherds. Because look, Nicodemus is amongst them, and Nicodemus, I don't see him as a bad shepherd. But if you were a Pharisee and you were a bad shepherd, Jesus is bringing the heat with Psalm 82 and Ezekiel 34. And so we're almost finished. Stay with me here. So verse 40, and he went away again beyond the Jordan to the place where John was baptizing at first, and there he stayed. Then many came to him and said, John performed no sign, but all the things that John spoke about this man were true, and many believed in him there. And so this is where he was first. He's in Gentile territory, and you got to keep in mind here we're only 10 chapters into John. We're nearing the end of his earthly ministry, and so he's retreating to minister to those who don't require signs, whose ears and eyes are open, and they're hungry. And it's kind of an interesting thing, and we're gonna find out in the next chapter where he's gonna say, hey, there's only so much time in the day, and I have to do stuff while there's still time in the day, and I think he's kind of reaching out here, out into the fringes, and so, anyways, some questions to think about. I'll leave you with some questions. And this is the first one that I was thinking about. Have you been affected by bad spiritual shepherds? And I say this because I've talked to others, and I've had this happen to myself. Church hurts are the deepest hurts that there are. I don't think there's any hurt deeper and more long-lasting than a church hurt. And so, have you been the victim of a poor spiritual shepherd? I would ask that you go with my second question. If that's happened to you, well, before I even get to my second question, if that's happened to you, I pray that you go sit in the Father's lap. Go find the Father, sit in his lap, and don't get out. Don't get out. I'm talking months, years, however long it takes. Don't get out of his lap until you're healed, because he's the only one who can heal you. Oftentimes men do things in the name of the church and hurt others, and it's like those things, those cuts are deep and take a long time, and the only person who can heal them is the Father. And I firmly believe that. I've had a few church hurts in my life, and the Father is the only one who can heal those. The second question I have for you is a real simple one. Remember, we talked about sheep. Is the Lord your good shepherd? Are you in Jesus's fold? Is Jesus your Lord? If not, I want to say, for heaven's sake, and that is true, for heaven's sake, get in his fold. Come through the good shepherd. He is the way, the truth, and life. No man comes to the Father but through him. And so do that. Get into Jesus' fold. And then the last one I have is for those of you who are shepherds. Are you shepherding others? Has God called you to shepherd someone? And so I want to leave with these things. Are you honoring the calling by feeding them, strengthening them, healing them, and going up and gathering, leaving the 99 and going after the one? And that would be my encouragement for you, some things to think about. And I apologize it got dark, and I apologize I'm late, but we're on the road. We're having fun. And as a teacher, I found out that I need summers to kind of refresh, and the Lord has me on a refreshment right now. And so the dry sponge is getting some water put in there. So I hope you'll tune in. I'm already looking at the next chapter. It's really good. Lazarus. I'm thinking of calling it the Tale of Two Sisters. And I don't want to spoil too much here, but because I'm not done chewing it yet. But I really think the story is about Mary. I don't think, everybody's like eyes are on Lazarus, because Lazarus, spoiler alert, Lazarus is raised from the dead. But I honestly think the story is about Mary, and that's where I keep I keep ending up. And so we'll see. So I hope you join me next week. All right. Until then, Godspeed. Blessings.